Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the John Zon Community Center on Pleasant Street in Greenfield. This is the Greenfield Public Schools School Committee meeting. Today is Wednesday, February 12th, 2020. It is 6:34 p.m. and this meeting is being recorded by GCTV. Is anyone else in the audience recording tonight? Melina's recording for the recorder. Thank you. And also, yes?
Just making an audio recording to have a backup in case we need it.
Thank you, Member Johnson. Anyone else recording? Okay, I will call this meeting to order, and we'll do a roll call. Member Johnson, Secretary Johnson, would you like to do a roll call for us, please?
Yes. Member Hollins? Here. Member Karen?
Here.
Member Ekstrom?
Here.
Member Poyetti?
Here.
Member Wall?
Here.
Member Johnson? Here. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Second item on the agenda, we have a number of draft minutes from previous meetings to approve. The dates are November 18, 2019, December 11, 2019, December 16, 2019, January 8, 2020, January 13, 2020. I will entertain a motion to approve all of the minutes.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
It was Member Ekstrom with the motion and Member Karen with the second. Do we have discussion? Any changes, comments? Member Hollins.
On the November 18th minutes, when we met next on December 11th, and we went to approve the November 18th minutes, Adrian Nunez moved, we approved the minutes, but then we moved to table it, and it says in the minutes of the next meeting, the intent is to confirm from GCTV recording information about the procurement of vans. The mayor had asked for that, and that's why we didn't approve the 18 minutes. Did I do something wrong?
I reviewed the full recording of that discussion, and procurement was never discussed.
Thank you. Member Wall.
I was not here in November and December, and so I hesitate to vote to approve minutes when I was not a member
Correct.
of the committee.
Me as well. I'm going to abstain from the vote.
Okay.
Member Hollins.
On the December 11th minutes, page 3, we were reviewing Section B policy, and the second one down, BEDBE, agenda format, there was a question that came up by Member Karen on two options. One was what we were currently doing, which was 5 items, and I think another was the state sample, which had 10 items. What I recall is this was going back to committee. There was some discussion that it was going back to the committee, but it's not mentioned in the minutes. Do you remember that?
I do. I remember the conversation. Thank you. I do remember the conversation. I feel like, first of all, I was rereading these now before. We accepted them. We passed unanimously. I don't remember it being referred to committee. I guess I would have to go back and review. I don't remember that. It definitely didn't come up in our current policy meeting. I don't know if Member Johnson remembers either. I believe and this conversation circled for a little bit, and it came down to that we had the more brief agenda and the state had the more in-depth agenda, and in fact it didn't really matter because the it was a sample, it was an example of what an agenda could look like, but the chair has the right to make the agenda look sort of any way, but we can go back and review the conversation. I mean, we passed to accept all the minutes unanimously, so, or all the policies, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I didn't have time to go back, but I
Yeah, I didn't.
remembered it as something that was going to go back.
Yes, Member Hollins.
Page 2 of 3 on December 16. I just wanted to mention that these are incomplete. I had to go back and look. There are other minutes from some of these years that weren't released, particularly 2018. I just want to mention that these are not the complete set of non-public minutes from 2018. It's just a point. It doesn't change our actions. I just wanted to mention that this is not complete for these years.
So that we can correct the record, can you note any minutes that you believe are missing?
Yes, I can, actually. What I did is I went back through our meetings, posted agenda, and I looked at every meeting where it said we were having a non-public session. And what made me think about that is in 2018, when we were doing the superintendent contract, we didn't seem to have any minutes from that. So, for example, in 2018, according to what was on our agenda, we're missing the minutes of April 11, 2018, April 30, 2018, May 7, 2018, May... Pardon? Well, I can...
These are not minutes, I'm sorry, can I ask a quick clarifying question? You're not saying that we voted in those minutes? Those are just
No,
minutes we haven't
I'm not-
touched yet? Okay.
I'm not even addressing that there's anything wrong with our minutes that we're reviewing tonight. I'm just saying this was not a complete review of the minutes of that year.
It does look like to me that the section F does not indicate that it's a complete set.
Correct.
So there's not really anything to correct at this point.
No, it's just a point of information.
Okay, any other discussion, questions, comments on the minutes? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. All those in favor of approving all of the minutes listed? Okay, we doing a hand vote.
Roll call.
We don't have anyone missing, we don't have to do roll call, but we can.
But you all are going to abstain from not having been here?
Correct.
So it might be a good idea. to
Yes,
get
I
it.
agree, thank you.
Could I make a suggestion? Because of the change in membership, it might be worthwhile making a motion for the minutes before the change in membership only, and then members can abstain if they weren't present for those minutes, and then taking a new vote for members for meetings at which the members present were present.
That could be a friendly amendment to the motion. Who made the motion? Member Ekstrom?
Yes.
Do you accept that friendly amendment to split it in two?
I do.
Okay. So we will not do further discussion unless there is any at this point, and then we'll take a vote for the minutes before January 8th, which is November 18, December 11, December 16 of 2019. All those in favor?
Aye.
Hollins, Karen, Ekstrom, Johnson, and any opposed and abstaining? Member Wall, you're going to abstain. I'm also going to abstain. Mayor Wiedegartner is going to abstain. And then we have a second vote for January 8 and January 13 of 2020. All those in favor of approving those minutes? Just a hand vote is fine. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the motions both pass. Thank you. And we're moving on to public comment. Do we have anyone here for public comment this evening? If you're here for public comment and you did not already sign in, you can see Ms. Farber over here, the recording secretary. So for public comment, please state your name and where you live, and you will have 3 minutes. I will, if you're patient with me for 1 second, I will set a timer.
We need Joe here to help you.
Oh, Joe. Yeah, someday he'll know his numbers and he'll help us. He is a helper.
I can't wait.
Okay, go ahead, please.
My name is Susan Voss. I live at 158 Log Plain Road in Greenfield. I am an IA at the Academy of Early Learning in Greenfield, and I am the Unit C representative for the IAs. Welcome to our new people, and hi to everybody else, because, I'm here all the time. Would like to just give you an update on our stalled contract and how it's affecting our IAs. As a whole, the body of IAs are very frustrated and angry. New people are getting hired, and many are leaving soon thereafter. Great IAs who work in the school system are looking elsewhere for jobs. All the surrounding areas pay more. The more we wait, the less likely we are as a group feeling that this will be settled. And it's a very unsettling thing to know that we could get this raise that is very well deserved and nothing's happening. We're hiring and training people who then leave, so then we're hiring and training more people. Our students need consistency, and that's something that is not happening. Add to that our worry that if the contract is funded as was proposed by the previous mayor, it will shortchange our most vulnerable students. Yes, we do want a raise, and yes, I believe we deserve one, but I worry about our kids, and I'll tell you, most of our IAs do worry about our kids. Our job is to teach and care for our kids. We do that every day. Your job is to assist us in doing our job and make sure that we're doing it right. The city council's job is to fund the contract. I've recently discovered I don't have to worry about that because that's really not my job. My job is to help with toilet training and to help kids learn their numbers and letters. And I enjoy that part of it. So we are asking to please help the city council fund this responsibly so that we can put our full attention on our kids and so that our kids do not suffer. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comment?
Good evening, I'm Doug Selwyn, 38 Forest Avenue.
Turn the microphone on, please, Doug.
Oh, yeah. I'm still Doug Selwyn, 38 Forest Avenue in Greenfield. I have 3 different things, unfortunately all related to money. The first has to do with the IAs. And because you just heard what you heard, I will just cut to the piece that recognizes that one of the things that happens with the IAs is that their devotion and love for their students actually ends up being used against them. Because people know that they're not going to leave their kids, right? They care so much about them that they will keep working even though they are being underfunded badly. And it's a real, real shame. There's no emergency about funding them because they'll stick around. And it's just wrong. We've got to pay them. We've got to pay them. They're working with our most vulnerable students. The contract was worked out as it was worked out. I don't know how the money disappeared that was supposed to be there. That was the previous administration. But we've got to find the money and pay them. So that's one thing. The second, I wanted to comment on the budgeting process, which seems to me insane right now. All of you are scrambling to try to meet a deadline that is not your fault, but you've got this deadline to come up against. So you're meeting however many times a week to do this, and it becomes crisis management. We've got to get this done. I remember doing this in graduate school, right? The paper's due tomorrow. I guess I should start working on it tonight. That's no way to do a budget, and it's no way to plan a district's budget over the years, so that there's a sort of a comprehensive and critically thought out through line. So I hope there's a way to revise how the budgeting process works to give you more time to do it thoughtfully, to work with the city council, to think through issues, to think about where do we want to go and how can we do this into the future rather than having to scramble to meet the deadline. I mean, I applaud you putting in the work you do to make this happen by the deadline, but it just doesn't seem to me a wise way to go. And the third item has to do with the curriculum coordinator. Again, we still don't have one. One of the ways to make the district financially solvent is to keep students. And one of the ways to keep students is to have a really high-quality program that's well thought out and coordinated and coherent, and that goes from K to 12 with a thoughtful process. And you need a really good curriculum coordinator who sticks around in order to be able to do that. Was that 3 minutes already? Time flies. So if it takes a little more money as an investment to get somebody here who will stay, please do that. We need one. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional public comment? Okay, we will move on to the committee reports, first being the chairperson's report. I didn't prepare anything written this evening, but I just want to make a comment. Expected public comment this evening regarding the Unit C contract, and we did get that, and I, as always, appreciate the thoughtful support for Unit C and the folks who do the very challenging work in the district. I will say with full confidence that this school committee wants that contract to be funded, and we are working towards that end. As many of us know, there was a change in the availability of funding, and the City Council has put forth a proposal to fund half of that contract, and they are looking for us to fund the other half through the school department. And we do not yet have a plan in place for that, but we are working quickly to identify what is possible and how to make that happen. And we will work also with the city on that. I also want to say that in talking with many people in Greenfield, many folks who care about this issue, I have heard from a number of folks that this is the first time that the city has not funded in full a contract, a union contract that was negotiated. And I do want to correct that. That is not true. And I think it is important that we all have accurate information. Of course, we want to work with the city as best as we can to make sure that we can fulfill our obligations when a contract is negotiated. But it's important also that we have a narrative that is accurate. And I have learned since taking over, I stopped counting how many hours I've been school committee chair. I do actually count it in days now, but it's not a lot of days. But I have learned that this is not the only contract where funding has been expected from the department. So I feel it's important that we have that on the public record, that we just need to continue to work with the city, which has its own significant budget challenges. And certainly what we do not want to do in the present budget climate is fund a contract for the fiscal year 20 only to have to turn around and, oh, I'm timing myself. I'm all done. Sorry. I'm all done. Thanks, Amy. Only to, we don't want to have to turn around and then make changes in staffing because we don't have money in fiscal year 21. And so we're working on both simultaneously, and we will get all of it done as quickly as possible. And that is the chair's report.
Can I follow up on that a little bit?
You absolutely may, because you don't have your own report, Member Ekstrom, so please go ahead.
I actually want to follow up a little bit on what Amy was saying. I think it's interesting
that since Amy has taken office, as well as Roxanne having taken office, we've gotten a lot more fiscal information from the city than we got previously. And the first meeting within the last couple of weeks is when Amy came to a meeting and said, well, you know, this is what I've found out, is that the city doesn't typically fund fully the first year from sustainability in a new contract. That was the first time I'd heard that. So I want to say kudos to both of you ladies for the work that you're doing, and I'm thankful that there's a lot more communication already that's been going on.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Moving on to the superintendent's report. Superintendent Harper, please.
Thank you. There's somebody in the audience I'd like to bring up and introduce at the beginning of my report. In the last meeting, we talked about an interim appointment of the principal at the Discovery School at Four Corners, and I wanted to take a moment during my report this evening to have her just say hello to the committee. So Ms. Putnam, if you could come join us up here. Casey Putnam has been the interim principal at Four Corners just a little over a month now, and she's doing a terrific job.
You may count it in hours if you'd like.
Same thing.
Sorry.
Several hours, maybe days by now. Yeah. Microphone.
Green light.
That's a good sign.
I promised her I wouldn't make her speak, and I promised her I wouldn't let the committee ask too many questions, except I just wanted to bring her here in to say, she left the classroom as an educator at the Academy of Early Learning, and within a matter of days or hours, she was in the role of interim principal at Four Corners. And we really appreciate when teachers step up into the role of administration, in particular because they know the work of what it takes to be an educator. And principals, although people often forget this, principals are educators. They're just in a slightly different role. And we heard in public comment earlier about the ways that different people from different roles can support our children. And educators in the classroom are leaders, and principals in the building are leaders. And so it's always interesting and exciting when a teacher steps out of the role of classroom leader and into the role of building leader. And so I just wanted to acknowledge and appreciate you in that role at Four Corners.
Thank you very much. It's been a great and wonderful welcome that I've had at the Discovery School, and I'm looking forward to finishing out the school year as well.
Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Putnam, just briefly, before I continue with my report?
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome to stay, but you do not have to. As riveting as it is. All right, in your packet, you have some materials. They include information about the beginning of registration at the Academy of Early Learning. We're going to talk about this evening, the rates and tuition setting at AEL, so you have some information on that. We're also well into the kindergarten registration season, so you have some information on that. Starting at the beginning of March, we begin kindergarten registration with the sort of month of March being the kickoff. And then for families, every Thursday night in March, our registrar stays late and makes available hours. So March 5th, March 12th, March 19th, and March 26th from 4:30 to 6 at central office to make sure that families who work during the day can come down and take advantage of those hours to enroll. And March 3rd is our kindergarten registration day at the schools themselves. So we encourage everybody out there with youngsters to enroll early. That helps us plan on our class sizes, make sure that we're fully staffed, and of course helps the children prepare for and anticipate what's to come in the kindergarten year. You also have some local media coverage about an amazing partnership that was built, also took place at the Four Corners School, with this idea of Grand Buddies and children, really building this kind of innovative partnership, quite a beautiful idea and approach that's working quite well. Not in your packets, but sent out earlier today, was just a huge shout out in local media to our girls basketball team, league champs again, 5th year in a row. We really have terrific athletics programs as well as amazing academics. And for our scholar athletes who are doing both, I just think that's terrific. So please join me in congratulating those girls and wishing them luck. Tomorrow they're supposed to play in Pittsfield, but again, weather. So there's weather. You have newsletters from all of the schools. Please do take time to read through them because it gives you a great glimpse into what is happening. Although I will not read through them, you have a really good sample of the kinds of wonderful activities that take place at our schools. You have financial reports in your packet, the Munis report that's always provided, as well as the modified report, thanks to the business office. You have these. We have put a soft hold on expenditures at this point in the year. That's not atypical. It is not all items. It is for non-essential items. So there are still materials and supplies being purchased. We're very clear that we want children to have what they need at this point in the year. And if there's a need for supplies, that we want to ensure that the students that are sitting in seats today have those supplies. At the same time, we are heading into a challenging fiscal cycle, and we want to make sure we have a clear picture of what that looks like before we move forward. So you have financial information in your packet. And then lastly, I'll just pass along a spotlight that ran in Valley Kids on some of the community connections at many of our schools. This is a real strength of our schools in many different ways. At Federal Street, students delivering holiday wreaths, the life skills students at the high school making bouquets at Buckley Nursing Home, and Greenway football players serving a meal at John Zon. So I'll just pass this along so people can see it. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Member Johnson, a question for the superintendent.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what it was called, but we requested an audit, I think, for Chapter 70 funds coming into the city. Could you give us an update on that process?
So this is a topic that's being tackled in the town school meeting. The audit was relative to specifically looking at the idea of direct and indirect, not so much whether we were meeting the net school spending requirements, but just as to Chapter 70 as a funding stream coming from the state level to help us take a look and plan for maximizing those dollars going to children. So we're working with Jay Sullivan from the Department of Education, the mayor's office, Liz Gilman, the finance director, Steve Nemberko, myself, the chair, and we have had preliminary conversations looking at updating an MOU, a memorandum of understanding between the city and the schools about how we count those kinds of costs. And I think maybe Monday of this week, we initiated our sort of most recent effort to meet in the next week or so with Mr. Sullivan. And again, that's about having a full understanding of the financial picture so that there's this portion of the budget that the schools control and that the school committee votes on. And then there's a portion of the budget that's held on the city side, things like health insurance, indirect costs like electricity, things that we may not directly control but are still related educational expenses. And sometimes we move through the budget process and then late in the budget process we hear something about that second pot has affected the first pot. And so the idea is to kind of bring them under the same umbrella at the outset so that we have a clear understanding of the responsibilities of the city and that we can plan accurately and really make sure that the dollars that we have access to have the best impact for students.
Thank you. My other question is, at our tables and around on the chairs, there's these wonderful Valentines. Oh, it looks like it's from Cub Scout Pack 3, the Tiger Den. Did you bring those for us, Superintendent, or?
Actually, I should have added that to my report. I'm sorry. I got an email from Hope McCary, the director of the Senior Center, this afternoon, indicating that they were inundated with Valentines. What a great problem to have. And they have decided to share the wealth with the school committee and left those behind. So for those of you who are here for the meeting, the front chairs also as well have Valentines that are up for grabs, if you would like. And there is a note on the back of who actually made it. So yes, quite fun.
There's two final notes that I forgot to mention. One is that we just celebrated the 100th day of school. So if you're in the schools, it's a great way to mark the 100th day of school. So many different events taking place, especially at the elementary level. And also that there's an update on the trip that the school committee previously approved. Ms. Cloutier provided updated information, which has some of the flights and times. There's no vote needed. There's no action needed because these dates fall within the range that was approved by the committee. It's simply an update so that you have the information about that as was requested.
Any further questions for the superintendent? Thank you for that report. We are moving on to the subcommittees. Can we start with budget and Member Ekstrom, who is the chair of the budget subcommittee?
All righty. So I'll just do a quick summary. We've had, there's minutes for
35 meetings.
Yeah, we've had 35 meetings in the last couple weeks. And the long and short of it is we have been, when we first met, we talked about how sort of we did some organizational things and what we wanted to look at. But also one of the things that I asked for from the superintendent is a budget that was inclusive of the requests made by each of the schools. Because I wanted an actual idea, a hard cost, or I guess it's not hard cost, but a true review of what it costs to educate our students and our children. And that's what we've been working with. And when it all sort of becomes public, I don't know if we're talking about any of that yet, it's going to be a surprising number. And I wouldn't expect that we would meet that number. However, I'm really interested in the community and the state and senators knowing how much it costs to actually educate our children. And so we've sort of requested or suggested to the superintendent that that be the budget that she submits as her budget. So I don't know if that will happen ultimately, but that's sort of where we are now. We've met with principals. We have yet to meet with directors. We had a snow day, so we didn't have a meeting that day. But we're still working hard on it, and it's actually been a really, it's been an interesting process. Our subcommittee works well together. Steve has been able to provide us a bunch of information. Jordana's provided us a bunch of information, and it's been, knock on wood, sort of smooth sailing, at least as far as how we've been working on it. So it's been good. We're learning a lot together.
The only thing I would add to that is, so our budget subcommittee is Member Ekstrom, myself, and Member Wall, and we're grateful for the attendance as well on a regular basis from Mayor Wiedegartner, who's been very engaged in the process, and we appreciate that. And Member Hollins also has attended the last meeting that we had as well. So it is truly a team effort, and I'm really grateful that folks who are not assigned to the subcommittee are still feeling it is important to spend time with the process. So that feels good. Any questions for the budget subcommittee? Mayor Wiedegartner.
I don't have a question. I
Please.
just have a comment, which is I have whatever the disaster plan. No, the weather plan from DPW.
She does not have a mic.
So we're sending all of our kids to your house?
Oh, good. I won't be there. They'll have to deal with Glinda, the dog. No, we don't really have a way of knowing until 4 a.m. tomorrow. Do we have an extra day in which we can deliberate? Because now that's 2 in what is a very tight schedule.
We do, actually. We've set up 2 more dates. Next week, we're meeting on Tuesday.
That's right, you're right.
Tuesday and
So
Wednesday
we
evening.
might be a little behind in that, but yeah,
We
Tuesday
added a
and then
meeting.
Wednesday evening,
yeah, okay,
and again, Thursday morning if necessary.
okay.
We added a meeting in anticipation of snow.
Oh, good. That was probably the
And 'cause
meeting
we
I
love hanging
wasn't
out.
able to attend. Okay, thank you.
Can I just comment on snow for a second?
Yeah,
Currently, the weather forecast says for at least 2 to 4 inches tomorrow, not letting up until the afternoon. It's very likely that there would be at least a delay. We're continuing. I don't know, it's people in the audience are making hand signals. It's like baseball. Oh, the updated forecast while we're talking is 3 to 5. It looks like it might be a good sledding day, folks. I can't control the weather, I'm so sorry. Calling weather and snow days is one of the least popular things a superintendent does. We don't control the weather, we just try to keep kids safe and make sure that on the days they come to school, they have a really good school experience. So I will be putting out a call in the morning. It'll either be a delay or a cancellation. It's not going to be an on-time start, I can tell you that.
You heard it here first.
Teachers thrilled, parents not so much. Just saying.
Snow days.
Any further questions or comments? Member Hollins, please.
Could I just ask if there will be another time during this meeting to ask a question about the budget information we received in our packets?
Please ask. No.
I wanted to ask a question about the revolving fund report, just to clarify. The first column that says beginning balance, those are the receipts from the prior year. That's the July 1 beginning balance.
That's correct.
It looks like this. It's the top third
Yeah.
of a page. It's got several sections.
It's the last page of the.
And the top part is the revolving fund. So the first column is our balance, July 1. And is the second column the revenue that's coming in 2019-20?
Yes, 2019-20.
Okay, that was my question.
Oh, okay. That was easy.
I just,
All that way for.
Yeah, I know. I got my exercise today then.
I might have had another question.
Member Hollins, did you say you have another question?
I
Please.
did. My other question is whether there's clarification on any change in revenue. There's been so much in the paper about new money or different money. Is our revenue changed or anticipated to change for next year?
For next year,
The year forward, will there be a change, or was there a change this year?
we did receive, we will be receiving a little bit more money in the circuit breaker this year. Next year is really up in the air at this point. It's still up in the air, yeah. They're talking about changing a circuit breaker formula. They're talking about some of the SOS program in the Chapter 70. So, hopefully we get more, but I wouldn't bank on it at this point because it's not set in stone enough.
Could I follow up?
Please.
So with all of the discussion all year about increased Chapter 70 funding, that's not going to happen
It's going to be $300,000.
next year?
Next year, it may go up a little, but it's going to be around $300,000. And the big kicker was the $1.3 million for the FY 19-20, which is, as you know, is baked in to the pie. So, it's $1.3 million that we received last year. We'll continue to receive that indefinitely, but next year's new money is about $300,000.
And did the special ed transportation come in under the new program, the reimbursement?
Not that I know of. I haven't heard anything more about that. Okay.
I have a question. I think I heard you just say that you expect to receive the 1.3 million each year. Did I not hear that?
So what happens with Chapter 70 is that it's a hold harmless situation. So the Chapter 70 is not going down. So the new money will be $300,000 more. So when you
That's right.
So when you compare FY 21 Chapter 70 to FY 19 Chapter 70, it'll actually have gone up $1.6 million.
Okay, I see what you're saying. That's helpful. But in reality, what we have is $387,000 this year.
Of new money, yes.
Of new money?
Yes.
Okay.
Further questions for Steve? Do we have further questions about budget or the Budget and Finance Subcommittee? Okay, so we'll move on to policy and program. Have you guys even met yet? Yeah, okay.
So we met this past, was it Monday? Feels so long ago. We met Monday evening. We voted in a chair, and I have accepted that nomination.
Thank you, Member Karen.
We completed Section G, which was a lot of really interesting policy on personnel. So will be eventually coming for a first read. We do have a lot we need to finish up, though, from Bs, and I think we finally finished A and B, so now we need to get to D as a first reading or second reading at this point. I've lost a little track, but I anticipate that once we get out of budget season and things have a little more time in our schedule, we'll be able to bring more stuff forward for readings for the whole group.
Any questions for policy and program? Okay, we'll move on to health and safety. Has there been a meeting of health and safety?
There has not been a meeting, no.
Thank you. And we have negotiations, personnel contracts, which is Member Ekstrom, Member Karen, and myself. We also have not had a meeting yet since the turnover in the school committee membership. I did want to give an update regarding a couple of things regarding our representatives to various committees. The representative for the Collaborative for Educational Services is something that we have for, I have my phone out because I have the information in a couple of different places here, so I apologize for this. We weren't able to yet fill that representative seat, and I would like to try and have someone from the school committee be able to attend the Collaborative's next meeting, which is March 25th at 6:30 in Northampton. Their meetings are every other month. They alternate between Greenfield and Northampton. And so I would ask that the school committee members take that into consideration if anyone feels like they're able to represent us.
Let me just add that dinner is served. You do
What?
get-
Wait,
yeah.
what?
Yes, they have a meal, tacos, salad bar type thing when it's in Northampton usually, or fajitas or something. And it's like a deli sandwich and what have you when they meet in the transportation center.
That is key information.
Look, gets more people there, and it's pretty good.
And they're picking a new director this year.
New director of the,
I believe they're recruiting for a new executive director for the collaborative.
is his name Bill?
Assistant, I knew.
It was,
Assistant
I met
director.
with Bill Deal, and he did not mention that he was
wasn't that in
retiring.
their newsletter?
Assistant
Maybe I'm
director.
wrong.
I know, assistant director, but
We'll get some clarification on the status of the executive director of the collaborative. Is anyone at this point willing to volunteer to be our representative on that body? Oh, yes. Member Karen?
Nobody else is doing it?
She needs a dinner sometimes where she's not responsible for it. I understand.
Responsible for the school committee.
To be fair, I saw the meal at home.
Right. Oh, Member Karen, that is wonderful. Yes, thank you very much for representing us there. I appreciate that. I also have another clarification on representative. So there was some discussion regarding our representative from school committee to city planning and construction, and that is a body that is chaired by Member Wall. Is that correct? And Susan Hollins is also a member of that committee, and we got clarification from legal that Member Wall can continue to serve as chair and also be a member of school committee because our city charter is silent on that point. And it was just advised that Member Wall should not be voting on anything that would be a perceived or actual conflict of interest with the schools. So we appreciate both of you and your service to that committee as well as this one. Thank you. Are there any minutes from city planning and construction to be shared with school committee?
We did not have a quorum at the January meeting, so.
I hear member Karen might be interested in attending. That was a joke. Okay, thank you. Library Building Committee, Member Ekstrom, I believe you are a representative there. Is Library Building Committee active in meeting?
Building Committee is active in meeting, and Jean is also on that committee. She's a full-fledged voting member, and I'm a silent member, meaning I don't vote, but of course I chat. And our most recent meeting was looking at the mass proposal designs, thoughts from the architects, which is really interesting. And by mass, it's just, do you like the way that this lump of cement looks versus the way this lump of cement looks, and where the hole for a door is on this lump versus on this lump, things like that. And it was really, I swear to God, that's what it is. And so it was really interesting, and it was also interesting to see sort of, and Mayor's there, of course. It's interesting to see where everyone is pretty united in wanting the building to reflect the atmosphere in Greenfield and the architectural style of Greenfield, as opposed to something sort of really modern or something that would be easily to date when it was built. So we have another meeting. We have another meeting. We meet the first and third Wednesday of every month.
Yeah, so Wednesday after next. Yes, no?
Yeah.
No, next Wednesday. Yeah, next Wednesday.
But please, Roxanne.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. When she says cement, we haven't chosen the materials for the building yet. Some of it will be cement, but there were no fewer than 8 different styles presented to us. The architect was very agreeable, I guess, to giving us some really interesting options, some of which should not have been included. But nevertheless, I think he was just trying to gauge where we're at. So I think from what I saw, we will have a very nice library eventually. And the committee members all seem to be quite engaged, regardless of whether they're voting members or not. I was very pleased with the participation at that meeting. So that's all.
Thank you, Mayor Rita Gardner and Member Ekstrom. And I guess I'm anticipating the superintendent is going to whisper to me, are there minutes from that meeting? Did you guys have minutes? Okay.
There were minutes taken by the library.
That's right.
Perlman.
Lisa Perlman does our minutes, but I presume we won't have them till the next meeting.
That's my assumption.
Yeah.
It's just a gentle nudge that would be interesting to have those shared with the school committee as well.
Great.
Okay. The sick bank, have you all met yet? That's Katie, Member Karen, and Member Johnson.
I can speak to that. We meet on an as-needed basis as
Thank you.
issues arise, and none have since our last meeting. I have a question about, do we need to have a formal vote to affirm Member Karen in her role on the collaborative, or does she just
We
go by?
probably should be formal about it, considering they're feeding her dinner.
I'd like to make a motion that Member Karen represent us at the collaborative.
Second.
That was a motion from Member Johnson and a second from Member Ekstrom. Do we have any discussion? All those in favor? Passes unanimously. Thank you.
They have
Thank
nice
you, Member Johnson, for keeping us in line. Sick bank, I think that is the committee report, so we move on to new business. And the first item of new business is the 2021 GPS calendar.
Do you want to vote on budget and finance subcommittee minutes or not?
Or do we usually?
Might want to just note them in the record.
I'm being asked to, and I have no problem with it, to vote, or to note into the record of the school committee that the Budget and Finance Subcommittee minutes have been voted on and approved by the Budget and Finance Subcommittee and are available and in the record. And now we go on to the 2021 calendar, which is in the packets. This is a proposed calendar. And Member Karen, I so hope you're going to talk about what I want to talk about.
I would like to move to accept the calendar as presented, the final draft.
Not what you want.
Good thing we get discussion.
Oh, I just want to open up for
I'll
discussion. Second it so we can talk
I'll
again.
second so we can talk about it.
We got a motion from Member Karen and a second from Member Ekstrom. Any discussion?
Yes.
Member Ekstrom,
Could I talk about the calendar before
turn your,
everybody gets into there? Okay, so let me take you through
please
the calendar
discuss
before
the
everyone
calendar.
zeroes in on their pet peeve. The calendar process goes a little like this. We have time on learning requirements, so the first thing that's important with this school calendar is that we achieve at least 180 instructional days and that we meet the minimum requirements for hours of learning in our school buildings, which vary by level. We have done a couple of important things that were very positive with this year's calendar proposal. The first is that we also try to address parent and family engagement. And in years past, we've had both a meet and greet at the beginning of the year where families that are new to the district, or you might be changing schools, or you might have moved in over the summer, can get right into their classroom, see the school even before you've started. We hear from families and from teachers that this is very powerful. At the beginning of this year, for example, at the middle school, we had a new principal. And during meet and greet, she was able to meet every single family that came, shake hands with everybody on their way into the building. In terms of building relationships, that has been very powerful for our district. We have also had an open house later in September or October. And we have changed that a little bit because we found out last year that open house, which is later, about 8 weeks into the year, and parent-teacher conferences were right on the heels of one another. And parents were often showing up at school for parent-teacher conferences, which is terrific. We want them to. We want to have conversations about learning. And then we were sometimes having an open house within a couple of days or a week of that, and it felt a bit redundant for parents. That was the feedback that we received. We heard it from a number of staff as well. So we've changed that a little bit so we don't have that redundancy back to back. Instead, we've kept the meet and greet in August, and then we still have the parent conferences for K to 7 at the end of October. And the high school, which doesn't have those parent conferences then, is holding an open house. So we've tried to adjust that, and the middle school is also holding an open house at that time. So we've addressed that need in that way. The December break is a little bit shorter this coming year than it was this past year. That keeps the February vacation. We had a brief conversation about whether we should still have a February break vacation. It is still in there, and keeps the traditional April break. And then it builds in 5 snow days. So the last day of school as of this calendar would be June 23rd. So you have a sort of similar structure to this year, but that sort of addresses some of the changes. We've also added a few additional preschool days. We hear at the Academy of Early Learning that families are looking for additional coverage, and so there's a slight variation there. Although they start a little bit later than some of the other students, we've added a few extra days at the end as well. So that's just in general terms, that's an overview of what's in the calendar. And in terms of process, we start with those requirements, and then we look to any changes or feedback we've gotten through the year. We build a draft calendar. We send it to the union. The union sends it to all the teachers. And we get some feedback, and then there's a back and forth where that input is shared. Those changes are often, but not always, reflected in here. And then it goes back once more to the administrators, and then it comes to the committee. So you've got a document in front of you that, while perhaps not perfect, has at least been seen by everybody in the district.
Thank you. That's a very helpful overview, Superintendent Harper. Any discussion of the calendar? I think Member Ekstrom, you had some discussion. Please.
I have some discussion that I have every year, and I'm going to voice, I want to be, in all transparency, I took to my Susan Cameron Ekstrom for School Committee Facebook page to voice my complaint, my own personal complaint. It is not, does not reflect the opinions of anyone on the school committee or the superintendent or anyone else on the planet. I don't understand the point of February break. I don't understand why everyone needs a week off when the likelihood is they had 2 weeks off from Christmas vacation and have been in school for, officially looking at this, 27 days, but, I mean, odds are there's 4 or 5 snow days in there, so 22 to 23 days and you need another week off. I think that parents, again, this is my own opinion, I get teachers, and when I say teachers, I mean everyone who works in the school district. I get you guys on a vacation. I would totally want one as well. I think parents really struggle in January and February because there are snow days, and then there's a vacation. So, you're a single parent, you now have been home for 10 days. So, I have never understood the notion of February break. I would love it if it went away entirely. I don't think we should end the year early. I think the kids should stay to gain that amount of education. I have complained about this every year I've been on the school committee. Now I'm just saying it out loud and in public. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Ekstrom, and I see the mayor has her hand up, please.
I second that.
Yes! So
now you have 2.
I also agree with that. I am curious in what does it entail to actually rid the school calendar of a full week's break? I guess that's a question for the superintendent.
First, I want to say, I think I brought this up a couple months ago, and I said, if anybody wants me to get rid of February break, you have to tell me seriously now, because you don't want to do this lightly. And I think that hand waved.
Amy and I weren't here a couple of months ago.
And nobody else, so just for the record. So in all seriousness, some communities have considered this. It is not something that should be done lightly. I will tell you that there are families who have already made the plan for next year's February vacation now.
Okay.
And some communities that have done this have done a March break in place of February or April. I'll tell you the pros and cons as I see it. The pros of having the calendar as it is now includes that right now we have a number of schools where there's actually a lot of illness in terms of sort of just stomach bugs or flus or things like that. And in school buildings, we do a great job keeping clean. We do a great job teaching hand washing. We do a great job. Our custodians are fantastic. It's still really hard with a lot of small bodies and hands and foods and sneezes and tissues. So the February break is a really good opportunity to clean the buildings and help keep people healthy. That's something that I hear regularly, and people come back healthier after the February break, and we see illnesses tend to go down at that point. On the con side, we certainly understand that working families have a hard time with childcare, and in today's day and age, I think children benefit from the time in school, so I certainly am interested in that. If that's a serious task, that's not something I think we can tackle tonight. Looking at the calendar, I think you would need some parent input, some educator input, a small committee. Communities that have gone from the February-April break to a March break, some of them have done it well. Others have seen real serious backlash from the community of just saying this is not the direction we want to go. I think you would want to give ample time for community input if you wanted to make that kind of change.
That's helpful. Thank you. Further discussion? Member Karen and then Mayor Wiedegardner.
I agree that it's an interesting concept that we could possibly explore by creating an ad hoc committee, doing some, general information gathering from the thing. It's definitely not something we can think about for next year. It's definitely something we need to take a long, hard look at the district and see what it means. If it's something that people want to add to the agenda or whatever, then we probably should start doing that, making a motion. I would like to add this to the agenda and we can decide what to do next, all of that. But I also separately, every year it's a lot of snow days and everything, and I actually really appreciate that this past January, there was Martin Luther King Day, and then Friday was a teacher in service day, and this year it's not on the same week, and that makes me smile.
Prefer that it's not in the same week.
Yeah, last week.
We did that on purpose.
It ended up being like 3 days of school.
It's a short week, and it was
a
hard
short
for
week,
families.
and so it was a little hard. So I just appreciate that small change. Thank you.
Mayor Wiedegardner, please.
I support Member Karen's desire to put this on a future agenda and begin discussing it. and discussing how we can involve the whole community. Just a little history from several years ago. Once upon a time when I was on the school committee, we rather arbitrarily ended February vacation, and we never heard the end of it. So times have changed, and I think it's worthy of a discussion. But I think I'd like some input, maybe just to help me in that discussion right now, why we would have a March break instead. Why do we have any break, would be my question. Because I would much rather see, maybe it's the Southern in me, but I would much rather see our children be able to get out earlier in June, particularly when we have those snowy winters, when we overextend our snow day things. So that's my personal opinion. But I'm curious as to me, it's not a question of February versus March. It's a question of why at all when we want time in the classroom.
I do think Superintendent Harper already kind of addressed that, but please, if you have more to add.
Well, just to clarify, the idea of March is instead of February and April, you have one in March instead. So it eliminates a whole week of vacation. You would get out a week earlier.
So you wouldn't do April.
Right. Yeah, no, you wouldn't have a March vacation and an April vacation. So in communities where they have discussed eliminating one of the vacations and getting out a week earlier, they would eliminate the February and the April vacation, instead have one instead of two in March. So that gives you more instructional time. But even that move, which I think if anybody's done anything, it's been that in various communities, it might be worthwhile talking to those communities. What was the impact on learning? Did they find that they got more instructional time that was valuable, or did those weeks before the March vacation drag on and become, somewhat of filler? I think those things are worth looking at. In terms of instructional quality. There's
Turn your microphone on when you say such things.
Sorry.
There's an important comment about this calendar I do want to get to when we're done talking about vacations.
Member Hollins, please.
I think it's a great idea to study this. One reason is that we don't have air-conditioned schools. Mm-hmm. And many or most teachers that I've ever met with, once it gets really hot in the schools, it's really not very good learning time. So I think there's a reason to get students out earlier in June. And I think now with technology, there's ways to post homework if people already have plans to leave. But I will say, if you're a parent, the very most expensive time to take a vacation is during this February week. So people that want to schedule a vacation would save a lot of money if they traveled in March.
Member Johnson, please.
A couple comments, and then I'm going to make propose a friendly amendment. So one comment is that I certainly hope we continue to have a ton of snow days, but I just want to remind us all that we are in the middle of a climate emergency, and at the current rate, we can expect many fewer snow days, so we should be factoring that into our long-term thinking about the school system. And then I also just want to note that many families in the Greenfield Public Schools obviously aren't factoring in the cost of a vacation in their thinking about things, so I just want to note that. And then my friendly amendment is to accept the calendar as written, but to also create a committee, an ad hoc committee to study this issue before next year.
Member Ekstrom, did you make the motion? Would you accept that friendly amendment? Oh, Member Karen?
And yes.
And yes, I will.
Superintendent Harper and then Member Ekstrom.
I would like to discuss something on the calendar, not about vacations. If there's more vacation conversation, I'll wait.
I don't have a vacation piece. I'll let you go, and then I'll add my
Okay.
5 cents.
I do want to do one thing. I do want to say one thing about the vacation. I do appreciate that it's a time to clean down all the crud from the schools, because I have no doubt that there's a lot of liquids that are floating around that need to be cleaned and things like that. So that is literally the only actual viable reason that I've heard for the vacation to exist. Also that it was started in the 70s when there was the fuel situation going on and everyone just loves it, and so that's why it exists. But really the cleaning is the only one that I buy. Anyway, just wanted to, I do understand that.
I really think we're dealing with a New England tradition. I mean, I think these are vacation holiday schedules that are built around an agrarian society and children that were working in the fields in the summer. And I think some of these spring vacations are actually mud vacations when there were times there was so much mud due to rains and so forth. They're really built around the New England agrarian calendar, the seasons. And, I think without getting, too pedantic and going back to the sort of the history of Massachusetts public schools, that's why this tradition has been for so long. And for many families, it's what they were used to as a child, so it's sort of what they anticipate. It's not to say we couldn't do something different, but absent significant community input, we haven't made a huge departure from that calendar.
All right, I'm done.
Okay, I have two things. First is a question I think is easily answered. I do not see July summer school listed at all on the calendar, and I'm just curious as to why that is.
Was that listed last year on the draft?
I don't know that it's ever been listed. I'm just curious as to why it doesn't appear.
I don't think we've ever listed it. We could list it.
Is it super secret?
No, it's not super secret, but for example, Dr. Dickinson is here. We had a meeting earlier today about summer school planning. So it's February and we're planning for June and July. So it's, 4 to 6 months out. So it's not necessarily set at the time that the calendar is voted. So we're going to vote this calendar now in February, and in the next little bit, those will be published for the summer. So
Fair
something
enough.
to consider.
And then my other piece of discussion related to the calendar is I am one of at least a handful of parents that I have heard from that are not a fan of the half day at the beginning of the school year, the first day of school. They've been home for a long time. That's how I'll phrase it.
Is that a motion?
It's just a comment.
Well, I'd be curious why it is a half day, if there is a reason for it, if it's just an agrarian tradition.
There was a heat wave 2 years ago, and people liked the half day. Some of them.
All right, I'm not gonna lie, I am a fan of the half day because when at the start, I'm not gonna argue about it and say, no, we can't, it has to be a full day, whatever. But I have noticed that my kids go and they kind of get a feel for the place, and Cameron doesn't get quite as stressed out, and she comes home and feels a little bit more confident in what she will be doing the following day. However, they have been home a long time.
Even the ones who go to summer school have been home a long time.
Oh, yeah.
That was just a comment. I would want a groundswell of support before I would do anything other than comment.
So I'll just echo the comments that were made. We did sort of happen into this where 2 years ago there was a heat wave on the first day of school and we had to do an early release for safety reasons. The response to that was overwhelmingly positive. I literally have gotten no negative feedback about that early release, and to say that about an early release is saying something. What we noticed was, as Member Ekstrom noted, the transition for students, particularly students new to a building, new to a grade level, new to a school, particularly students in special education, particularly students who would otherwise have difficulty transitioning, was markedly improved. And for those students, coming for a half day meant they could see their classes, meet their teachers, figure out their locker, and then go home. And it was plenty in terms of being introduced to the school environment, learning the rules, routines, expectations, fire drill, safety procedures, and then going home for the day. And that meant that when they came back, they were sort of ready to tackle new things like actual content and instruction. So the response was very positive, and putting this out again to all the teachers, the response from teachers was positive. It also allows, teachers work a full day that day, so the teachers don't get any break on this half day. Teachers then can stay after, do additional faculty meeting, planning, coordination, that helps the full first day for students be really well organized. So from both ends of that, we ended up continuing.
Thank you. That being pro-teacher about it makes me feel slightly better, so I'll be okay with it for now.
Can I move on?
We may move on. We have a motion to approve the calendar, am I correct? With a friendly amendment to also add a task force.
Sorry, I have a quick question.
Please.
I just want to point out that in accepting this calendar, that means we've also accepted the semester change. Okay, great, perfect.
Yeah, so I just wanted to move on past the vacation discussion and into the semester change.
Member Hollins, you have a question or a comment that's not related to the semester change?
Yes, to the motion, I think our policy structure has subcommittees and advisory committees. I don't think we have task forces.
Subcommittees or advisory committees? Thank you for that clarification. This would be an advisory committee, I believe. Okay, thank you for that clarification. Let's move on to the semester change.
The superintendent may design task forces. The school committee may design ad hoc committees that are advisory to the subcommittee.
We can fight it out.
That's fine. We're going to do it either way. So in this calendar, aside from the dates that we've talked about, you'll notice in the boxes at the bottom, there's a really important change, which is to align between the elementary, middle, and high school. In the past, the middle school has had trimesters, and this is the first calendar, perhaps in a decade or so, maybe thereabouts, which puts all schools on a semester schedule. We're really excited about this. On the back of your calendar is a proposal about the semester schedule, which was sent out to the committee in advance. And I've asked Principal Dole to come here and to answer any questions you might have. In considering a change to semesters, the primary goal is that families that get used to a semester schedule at the elementary and then go back to it at high school don't have to switch in the middle. And we've been able to get feedback from staff, and I'll let Principal Dole speak to that. That means that we believe we can accomplish this at no additional cost, that teachers can accomplish their schedule that they were doing in a trimester block on the semester schedule, and we think it will accelerate the work that's taking place in the turnaround work at the middle school as well.
Good evening. It's nice to see all of you, and welcome, Mayor. So my first observation was that it seems strange that the middle school had a different marking schedule than the elementary and high school. So I approached my staff by saying, this is ultimately a decision I'll be making, but I'd like it to be informed by your input. Help me to understand how changing to quarters and semesters would impact the work that you do. Our Unified Arts program is a very rich and important part of our school. The morning Unified Arts rotations would not be affected at all because there are 7, and they already operate on a unique term that is broken into sevenths of the year. In the afternoon, we have a choice elective Unified Arts offering, and by shifting that from a trimester schedule to a quarter schedule, it would mean that students would have an additional choice offering that they could engage in. And certainly teachers recognize, particularly in those afternoon electives, that something that they did in 12 weeks, now doing it in 9 weeks, would have an impact. A good example is our theater program. There's a production that's done every trimester, and now to do it every quarter will be more challenging. Those are the kinds of pragmatic considerations that people shared with me. Our core instructional teachers, they teach all year, so having 4 quarters versus 3 trimesters isn't a change in the amount of time that they have with students. It is an increase in the number of times that they would be providing written feedback in the form of report cards and interim assessments to families, which I think is a benefit for more communication, but it also is certainly a demand on their time. So one way we can accommodate that with no additional cost, no impactful time away from some of the other things that they might be doing is to give them some time with their collaborative teams to work on the grading, grade reporting at those intervals. But in general, the response from the faculty was very positive. Some folks had been teaching previously in the district on the quarter schedule. I think that we can bring our middle school into alignment with our elementary and our high school with no significant hiccups.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Member Ekstrom and then Member Johnson.
Go ahead, Glenn, I've been chatting all night.
Member Johnson.
Can you just clarify a little bit more about how you will have increased collaboration time but without an additional cost? How does that work?
Sure. So one of the great strengths of being an extended learning time school is that our teachers have prep periods each day, but they also have collab time each day. And I schedule the way that the collab time is used. So prep period is when teachers make individual planning decisions and work, and that's essentially their time to prepare. The collab time is time that I schedule, and one way that I can support my teachers in making a change like the one we're describing is saying that instead of having a collab meeting where they might be sharing instructional practices and strategies with each other, this would be a time when they could be preparing their grade reports and writing comments. So that's what I'm making reference to.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hi.
Hi.
And this is not my purview, and I'm a parent making a suggestion. Would obviously be the superintendent and your decision. I wonder if during that, allowing students access to another choice option over the course of the year could be turned into allowing students a study hall in that time, or allowing students time to go outside in that time. Because, again, this isn't my purview, and so I'm just bringing it up. I having had 2 kids now, having gone through the school, I think because it is such a long day, I think if some actual programmed specific downtime were in there somewhere, and study hall, it's working downtime, but you're not actively learning, you're sort of passively learning and working on things that you've been taught. So I'm just curious about that, if that would ever be a thought.
We've explored that in the past. It is a longer day, and some parents have sort of asked for that or raised the topic. Under the expanded learning time grant, it's not an allowable use of the time to have a sort of study hall or directed study. It has to be direct instruction with that expanded time that you're providing.
Principal Dole, did you have anything to add to that? Okay.
No, thank you.
Any other comments or questions regarding the semester change? Do we need to vote on this separately, or we can pass as a...
If the calendar passes, it passes.
Moving on to a vote, then. We're voting on the calendar for 2021, inclusive of the semester schedule proposal for all schools, including the middle school. And there is an amendment to that to also have I already forgot what it's called, advisory committee formed to look at the February break. All those in favor? Aye. And that's unanimous. Thank you.
Just a moment to thank you all for the great work on the semester change and taking a fresh look at that and bringing that to us. Appreciate that.
Agreed. Thank you. We are moving on to AEL tuition rates for 2021 school year. Superintendent Harper is orchestrating something here.
So I'm asking the principal of the Academy of Early Learning, Mr. Tom King, and our business manager, Mr. Steve Nimberko, to come forward to talk a little bit about the proposal that is in front of you. While they're coming up here, I'll just say that the Academy of Early Learning has two funding sources. One is local revenue and state aid, as are the rest of our schools do, which includes special education funding and so forth. And then it has tuition revenue. And the tuition pays a small portion of the cost of operating the Academy of Early Learning. And that has, for a number of years, we've not made a tuition increase at the Academy of Early Learning. And this is by far one of the best values in our area for a preschool program. And we routinely hear from people that the cost that they're paying elsewhere is much higher. It's important to us that it remains affordable and that early childhood care is available to students in the Greenfield area. That's why we offer a sliding scale and different rates. However, it's important that we maintain the quality of that program and that it remains viable. So we're proposing rate increases for this next coming year, and we're also suggesting changes for the following few years to help families with their planning. Although I'm only going to ask you to vote on the proposed rate increases for the 2021 year tonight. Go ahead.
I'll start.
Turn the mic on.
Oh, sorry. There we go. Is that better? Okay. So when we took a look at this, the thing that jumps out at you right away is the fact that there's been no increase in 2 years for this program. The other thing that jumps out right at you right away is the relative low cost for a full-day program of childcare. Here, you're talking for a full-pay student around $542 a month, and for on the sliding scale, the lowest scale of $246 a month for full-day childcare. So it's, it's a well-priced program for people. I know myself, I've paid almost 3 times that much for childcare. So it's a good value for the residents of Greenfield. So what we're looking at for FY 2021 is a 10% increase to kind of make up for those 2 years that we didn't. So what does that give us? That gives us about $50 increase per month for level 5, which is full pay, to $596, and about a $25 increase for the level just above free, to $271. This will provide about $22,000 in revenue. As you know, we've tapped into the revolving account for about $150,000 more money for next year, and depending how the budget goes, it may be that or even higher as we go forward. So it's time that we increase that money, that amount of revenue. However, this isn't going to recapture that full 150. If we were going to look at recapturing that full 150, you're talking almost a 30 to 50, 40% increase, and which then would scare away people. You'd lose students, then you'd lose revenue, and it's a whole domino effect there. So, so we've tried to keep it relatively modest, knowing that costs do increase, and knowing that this is a service that is relied on heavily by the parents.
So it's a joy to be the principal at AEL. It is a gem of a school, and I really think a model of how preschool centers operate. I'm in favor of this increase, and I say that hesitantly because I know any increase impacts people. But we do hear, and we did a check of preschools in the area, and AEL is a great deal, a very, very good deal. I'll answer any questions you might have.
Member Hollins, please.
Steve, would you clarify, do we receive Chapter 70 reimbursement only for the students who are free?
The Chapter 70 funding for preschool, basically, it takes into account the special ed component of that and then halves it. So it's only a small portion of those folks. So we don't get full credit for every single student there.
But other than special ed, I was under the impression that we only otherwise, other than special ed, receive Chapter 70 if it's free.
No, the formula is kind of weird in that area. It's like the special ed population in the school with the Chapter 70 formula does. So what the Chapter 70 formula says is that it takes only about 2.5% of 2% of your total enrollment as special ed, when the enrollment is far more than 2% of the population. The formula then looks at your preschool population and says, well, we're only going to give you credit for half of the kids that you have to take. The free component is really what you've decided to do as a sliding scale for this. Other districts say, well, there's no sliding scale. If you want to come, you're going to pay full price, and that's it. So the free component is more a Greenfield-centric type component to this.
Superintendent Harper.
I just wanted to note, in terms of stepping back for a minute, there are folks probably on this committee and folks in the larger community that don't necessarily know too much about the Academy of Early Learning. Our Academy of Early Learning has been, I want to say we're in year 11 or 12. It serves students that are ages 3 and 5. We have a morning, a PM, and a full day program. We have certified teachers. We have a range of arts and music. We have a beautiful playground and a newly added play area that the Greenfield Education Foundation started. Our teachers are widely regarded for being caring and compassionate, but also running a strong instructional program and really helping students. And then we have a whole host of related services, including occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech. There's a beautiful gym, there's PE, and the program there is really quite comprehensive. And when you think about a model of early childhood, the idea here being that investing in our youngest learners is not only good educational and sound educational practice, it's also financially an investment that bears fruit as students gain skills early on that serve them throughout the rest of their academic career. So, we're talking a little bit broadly, we're talking about tuition rates tonight. I think families recognize both intuitively and just by virtue of having a youngster, the value. When we're looking at it from a budgetary perspective, there's always this question of, well, do we really have to have a preschool? And I think in study after study, investing in early childhood is an investment that pays off.
Mayor Wiedegartner and then Member Ekstrom.
So I think this is a question for Superintendent Harper. Other than this discussion tonight, are parents of students at the Academy of Early Learning, have they been forewarned that there may be increases? How have we communicated this to the larger community?
So it's my understanding Ashley Walsh is the tuition coordinator at AEL, and Mr. King in his communication with families have made families aware that there may well be a rate increase, but until it's approved by the school committee, we can't tell them exactly what it is. So it's a bit of a chicken and an egg. I will say that the families were squarely in mind in proposing these. Really, this just sort of cost adjustment, the increase that should have been made, not even to address the $150,000, just for actual costs, should have been much closer to 20 or 25% increase. And I simply wasn't willing to bring that forward. I know that Tom didn't support something that would be such a significant increase to families. So bringing it down to basically $50 at the most per family in terms of the regular tuition was the compromise in terms of something that we felt that families could reasonably adjust. Any increase, I'm a parent, have a child in an early childhood program, any increase is something that you have to, sort of adjust for. But we feel that this is fair and is still the best value going in our area.
Yeah, I would just add that we're in the midst of registration, and the information that has gone out has said that we can't at this point state what the rates will be. It will be an increase. We're not sure how much. I think at this point in February, it will be adequate enough time for starting in September for notification for parents.
Thank you.
Please, Member Ekstrom.
Do we do free breakfast and lunch there?
We do. That's
I
another.
couldn't remember.
Yes, that's another great point
Important
about the
point.
school. For every student, free breakfast and lunch.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions for Principal King or Business Manager Nemberkow or Superintendent Harper? Did we make a motion before we started discussing? No, my bad. I guess I have a question related to process and to approving this. It was, I think, implied by Mayor Wiedegardner's question that perhaps this is a sudden change that families may not have had time to comment on. Were you interested in making a motion to? No. Okay.
No, it was just a point. It was a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Principal King is probably correct in that the timing of doing it now is good, that people have time to adjust and save and whatever.
Correct. Okay. So I would entertain a motion to approve the tuition increases, increase, which would be proposed 10% in fiscal year 2021, 4% fiscal year 2021-22. Anyone want to make a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Member Ekstrom, and a second from Mayor Wiedegardner. Any further discussion?
I have a question.
Please.
I thought that the rates that were drafted here for future years, are we voting on those now, or were those put in for information purposes?
My recommendation would be that they be used for informational purposes, and we could even publish them as anticipated. If you want to vote them now, you could. They're being published well in advance and sort of made available to the public, so you understand that we would not anticipate, for example, a 10% increase this year and a 10% increase next year. We want families to understand that they would have a little bit of breathing room following that. At the same time, it could be less the following year, or it could differ slightly. So my preference, and I'll ask Steve his in a minute, but my preference would be that the subsequent years be anticipated and not require an actual vote of this committee tonight. We don't know the cost, for example, of operating the program next year. We could have change in funding structures that give us significant more state aid and could reduce the burden to families, as an example.
Wouldn't that be a dream?
Yeah, I agree. This kind of halves the problem where, okay, here's the roadmap ahead, barring any problems, but definitely FY '21, we have it set down and ready to roll.
Thank you.
So friendly amendment to the motion to approve the FY 2021 tuition per month and release the additional information as a draft schedule based on current conditions.
Who made the motion? Member Ekstrom, do you accept the friendly amendment?
Yes.
Any further discussion? Thank you, please.
It was in a previous conversation on the calendar agenda item, but we have expanded the number of days at AEL slightly. I think it's an additional 9 days or something in this year's calendar as you voted it tonight over the current year. And that's because one of the things we do here is that families are looking for the maximum number of days of care for their youngsters, and because they like the quality of the program when their children are there. So just I wanted to encapsulate that in this conversation here, if families are listening to this section, that we are hearing and addressing that sort of as part of this.
Thank you. Member Hollins.
I just want to say that I fully support parents who live at the poverty level having access to childcare, and my understanding is those parents, I don't know how we recruit those parents, but I think that's where the greatest payoff is for children in early childhood. It's children that don't have a lot of enrichment at home. So I hope we are able to serve those children.
Thank you. And that brings me to a question. We had heard in the Budget Subcommittee about the capacity of the program, and that this year there were no spots left pretty quickly in the school year. Is that, Principal King, is that something you can speak to, that you're at capacity at AEL right now?
Yes. I started last year in January, and I know that we were still accepting students through March. This current school year was full in November. Now, I say that full in November, but then we have some people that leave, and we have room for people on the wait list to come in. But that's quite a change from March to November. And we service, is it a third of the students in Greenfield?
Thank you. Member Hollins, please. And Member Ekstrom.
If there's ever an opportunity to have another advisory committee, serving children in this age group, it doesn't have to be in a preschool, it can be outreach. And I think in the Berkshires, they have a grand program getting materials into parents' hands, even if it's home-based enrichment, to look at the way other school districts make sure they reach all the children that need some kind of care. So my point is that it doesn't only have to be in a preschool.
Thank you for that point. Member Ekstrom?
This is just a paperwork note. On the proposed sliding scale where it says difference, you might want to change the word that rather than difference to say span. Because it's the span between the low end and the high end as opposed to difference. It's just me. Okay. But it might be easier to understand, because I'm looking at difference, like difference of like from this or that or what. So at any rate, that's all.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor in the motion as amended and stated?
Aye. Aye.
And that's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you to you both. Next item is Childcare by National Honor Society for school committee meetings. Aren't they all in bed?
The National Honor Society students?
No.
The children?
The children that might need childcare at our meetings. Shouldn't they be in bed by now?
So this is an opportunity for conversation. In some communities, the school committee elects to have childcare provided, likely by the National Honor Society or another volunteer organization of young people at no charge. And the benefit of that is that families who have children can then participate more in school committee meetings. Children can attend school committee meetings or be nearby with this childcare provided. Perhaps they could do homework or another activity. And we could increase community involvement in school committee meetings, which are, after all, public meetings. Public comment is wonderful and is a tool that is important for the school committee, but there are many families that aren't able to come and participate in public comment because they have children. And because they have children, they care about the schools, but it's a bit of a vicious cycle if you can't get to a meeting. So I have reached out to the high school principal and to Ms. Cloutier, who runs the National Honor Society program. They'd be interested in pursuing this and getting more information if the committee is interested in exploring it. What it would take is simply a vote of the committee tonight, and if so, I could get together a calendar, and Ms. Cloutier would work with the NHS students to see if we can get enough students signed up, and then we could bring this back to a future meeting and make the committee and the public aware of any child care that we'd be able to provide. Even if we only provided child care at half or a third of the meetings, then we may be able to improve community participation, specifically amongst families that have children.
Member Karen, are you going to make a motion? Please.
I move to have the superintendent and the leader of the National Honor Society and the principal of Greenfield High School come back to us with a plan of how this could work out. There's the motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Member Ekstrom.
That I have.
Discussion? Please, Member Karen.
I was just thinking about if that would change the location of our meetings, possibly. There's not a lot of space in this building, and if we're having a meeting here and then there's going to be a large number of children, clearly they wouldn't be in this room. I know that they're sort of protective of the floor in the dance room, so it might be something to think about if it would be better to be having it at the high school where our National Honor Society students feel more comfortable. I don't know. I just started thinking about that process.
Member Hollins and then Member Ekstrom.
My comment was a different idea, so I'll wait.
Member Ekstrom.
I think this is a lovely idea. I might suggest thinking about doing it for the PAC meetings as well. If you want to talk about that with them, maybe they may not be interested, but it's a thought to put in someone's head.
Like CPAC and LPAC. Don't they have, CPAC has childcare?
The YMCA provides free childcare, but it's also, could be a nice buddy building time with other students within the district as opposed to people they're not familiar with.
Fair point. Member Johnson, please.
I really appreciate the superintendent for bringing this forward, and I've seen you post about this on Twitter as well, and other communities that have done this. I think it's part of a bigger conversation that the committee may want to explore, of just increasing access for school committee meetings in general. I've thought of ideas of, how to have students providing music before meetings, or having community comment only meetings, having meetings in places where we're likely to access folks who have limited transportation, for example, at Greenfield Gardens or someplace like that. So I think this is a great start, and I don't know if we want to. I think maybe I'd ask that we have a future agenda item to talk about the possibility of creating an advisory committee to look at increasing access to school committee meetings.
Member Hollins, please.
Well, my comment was along those lines. What I'd like to see is remote listening. It isn't always easy or even advisable, really, for parents to be out with young children, but a lot of parents would listen in. There's ways to do that where one member of the committee might have a computer up, so if a parent had a question, they could send it in or make a comment, but you can have people listening in without interrupting the meeting and active. But I think what Glenn has suggested is a larger discussion of how more people can be involved is a good idea.
Thank you. Superintendent Harper, please.
I do just want to clarify that generally speaking, GCTV broadcasts live. So I know that a lot of families take advantage of live streaming and watch from home. I know that tonight we are not live streaming, but generally speaking, families are able to watch and listen. I think they have limited ability to participate in a two-way manner, though, and provide feedback directly to the committee. So I certainly support folks being able to access the meetings, even if they're at home in their pajamas. I think that's great. This might be one step forward, and I would be happy to hear other ideas or participate in yet another advisory committee. I think it's important to ask the question, what ways can we be more responsive to the needs of the community? This might be one, there might be others.
Thank you. Further discussion? So the motion on the table is to charge Advisor Cloutier and the National Honor Society to research the possibility of providing childcare at school committee meetings in the future. All those in favor?
Aye.
And that is unanimous. Wonderful. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the Unit C contract. And I think we've kind of talked about that already. I don't know if we have any updates from either the superintendent or the business manager at this point. Okay, so we still need to bring that forward, but I would be interested if there is any comment from school committee members. Member Ekstrom.
I'm
Please.
really talking a lot tonight.
It's okay.
When at our most recent budget meeting, I think we asked Steve to get some numbers for us, and part of the reason that we're not meeting on Thursday is because it's just going to take some time to get everything to come together. So I want to be very clear that we are looking at this, and I, as you all know, can't wait to make this happen. So I'm pushing, and I know that Amy is also working hard to make it happen, as is Roxanne, as is everyone. Really, it's
Yes,
painful,
yes.
but it needs to happen.
As I stated earlier, we're just trying to be very conscious of moving forward in a way that is okay for fiscal 20 and fiscal year 21 and the future, and the way forward is not yet clear, but we're working on it.
Do you mention the city council status?
Oh, I should mention city council status. So they have had a first reading and a vote that passed on funding half of the contract at, I believe it was 169.9 is what they passed. And they will have at their meeting next Wednesday a second and final reading and vote on that portion of the contract.
Because everyone knows this happens to me all the time, and I can't remember anyone's name. The Liz
Gilman, the
Yes.
town business manager.
She has also been very helpful in helping us trying to figure this out and explaining processes. So I want to make sure that she's given credit for all her hard work as well.
Any further comment on that? Member Johnson, please.
So just so I understand, the city council's moving forward on half, and then they've pushed the other half back to us. And is budget working on identifying the other half of that funding? Okay.
Correct. And what we're looking at is where that money would come from, which at this point really is reserve accounts, and what impact that has for this year and for the future. And those reserve accounts are not necessarily replenished in a way that allows us to use them easily in the future. And reserve accounts are really for reserves and not for this type of use. It's a bit unusual, so we're just trying to figure all of that out in a way that's sustainable, I guess is the word I would use. Member Hollins, please.
I think I heard you say at the Budget Subcommittee meeting, but maybe I didn't, that this was not the first time a union negotiation, a department was asked to provide half. Did you say that?
I also said it during my comment tonight, yes.
And I want to say that something that was brought to our attention about union negotiations was that many of the unions in the city, even when they negotiated an increase, they were small unions and the total amount wasn't very great. So what I wanted to say to that comment is I think there's a big difference in a budget. I'm going to make up the numbers because I don't know about the settlements. Between a union that settles on $40,000 and the department has to assimilate $20,000, then a union that settles $350,000 and somehow you're in a school district that's already not highly, I mean, it's a lot of money in our budget, but it isn't excessive for the size of our district, the needs of our children to absorb that kind of increase. So I think comparing what's happened with a small union increase and this particular increase, it isn't easy to compare. The other thing I want to say is what I recall about all the employees in the city is that we're pretty much the only department with 10-month employees. And that the city doesn't have that many 10-month employees, mostly year-round employees. And also, I can remember asking the city for the 100 lowest paid employees in the city, even during my time, and it was all, with maybe one or two exceptions, school departments. So we happen to have 10-month employees in this particular union at a wage that's lower. I think we found, at least what I recall studying, which is already out of date, a salary range that's lower than any other group of employees. So I think in this particular circumstance, where we were trying to address changes in the state's minimum wage, a group of employees that the city really doesn't have, comparable employees, getting a fair wage adjustment based on new minimum wage laws, I think generalizing that we should pay half of it because there may have been another union that set a precedent, settlement set a precedent. I think in this particular issue, we should, bolster our argument about this, because it's about, I don't know how many people, about 120 people, but we're the only place in the city, I think, that has a pay scale like this. So many hourly people trying to make an adjustment to the minimum wage law. So I would like to see some more consideration for this. Some other department has coughed up 50%, because I don't see where the school district has that money to just bring in this year. My concern is always literacy. I remember one year we didn't have money, and a suggestion was cut out reading tutors at the high school. We have to make sure the kids that graduate can read. And I think the cuts we have to make, where we're not a highly, we're an averagely funded district, I think it's too severe, this amount of money for the schools. So I don't know the solution, but I'm not comforted by thinking that another union settlement has ended up with the department paying half, because a lot of money, and it's based on the state changing minimum wage requirements with our 10-month employees, and I just think there's a more solid argument for more assistance from the city.
And I appreciate that, and your point is well taken. And I did, when I spoke, when Superintendent Harper and I spoke at the city council meeting on this point, I was very clear that these are employees that many of them do not yet make minimum wage. And to counter that with the argument that that's allowed in municipalities, I said, show me where we have DPW workers or accountants that are not making minimum wage or more. And that is a very important part of the narrative. My point this evening and my point at the budget subcommittee meeting was to make sure we're not using information or a line or a story that isn't fully accurate. There is, what I'd heard over and over again is that the city has to pay all of it in the first year. And what we've learned since then is that that has not been true with a couple other union negotiations. And I just want to make sure that that is accurate. I don't think that it's proportional. And one of the things that has held up what we are trying to do to fund the contract is to work on what that funding looks like, short-term and long-term. And that is not the piece that's settled. Please, Superintendent Harper.
Would it be possible to get information, whether in public session or executive session, just about amounts of any other city departments, just so the committee is well informed about what those amounts might be, what the proportion coming out of, and in particular, if they were minimal adjustments or significant minimum wage adjustments, where there was a significant gap between the employees' salaries and what the average going rate or the state minimum wage was for comparison, and so the committee has access to that information from the city side. I think that's important. And you raise a good point, which is we all need transparency and clear information about how to make informed decisions moving forward. Everyone wants to see high-quality employees paid a wage that supports them doing the work that they do with our children every day. And at the same time, we want to ensure that the school department continues to be in a solid financial position to be able to continue employing those same individuals, to provide those same services to the children every day. So the more information I think we have that's freely exchanged, the better that will be to support those discussions.
Member Johnson, please.
I'd just like to zoom out for a second just to say how absolutely ridiculous that in the richest country in the world we're having these kinds of issues. It's ridiculous. With a small tax on the richest Americans, we could fund universal pre-K. We could have cities and schools and school committees that are putting attention on policy and advancing the curriculum rather than getting the IAs stuck in the crossfire of this ridiculous city council versus school committee thing where the city doesn't have money and the school committee doesn't have money. And why don't we have money? It's because the wealthy aren't paying their fair share. So I just wanted to, I know that's not part of our role in the school committee to address that issue, but I just think it's part of the framing, and it's an important thing for us to remember while we're having these conversations.
Hear, hear. Member Ekstrom.
I actually just want to follow up on that a little bit. When we've been in relation to the contract and in relation to developing the budget, I've been pretty clear about my personal thoughts of cutting our budgets based on the need to meet some expense and my real lack of desire to do that. I would rather that we figure out a way to meet our expenses. And I've been doing some digging around. How is it that more money can be brought in the district? That isn't by city giving us more money or sharing or whatever it is. What is it that the city, or not city, that we as a community need to do to make this a more viable community and thereby bringing more people into the community in general and more students? And we've been working hard in our district to I don't want to say improve our education quality, but we've been working hard to make this a place where people want to come to school, and now they're doing that. And we have more students, and so we need more educators, and we need to pay our educators properly and all of those things. But I don't think that that's just a school district issue. I think that's a community issue and a city issue. And when I say city, I don't mean, town hall. I think that's something that we all need to think about as a community. Thanks, Glenn.
Thank you. Member Hollins, please.
One last comment. If you ever have an advisory committee on entrepreneurial revenue, I'd like to be on it. It's always an interest of mine of how schools can have more revenue without taxing more. But I want to say, before the current school committee was seated, I made an irregular recommendation that we borrow short-term, the amount of money we need, get the pay settled, and then figure out how we're going to pay it and take care of the short-term loan. And to that, the former mayor said something like, we never borrow short-term for operational expenses, that it was unusual. But the point is, neither the school nor the city has a bank account with only $1 in it. We have revenue and we parse it out. So I think we should try to figure out some way to get the pay settled, and as we negotiate how we're going to find the money. But I continue to think we should either borrow from ourselves or do a short-term loan and get these salaries adjusted while we're negotiating who's going to pay for it and how.
Thank you. I believe we now have more proposed advisory committees than we have school committee members. But thank you for that comment. Any further comments on the Unit C contract funding? Okay, the next one, procedural updates on the GCTV recording of January 27. That was a special meeting of the school committee that was in this room, just for informational purposes on where we're at with that. It was the perfect storm of needing recording. Recording Secretary Farber was not in attendance. Secretary Johnson was not in attendance. Minutes of the meeting and recording of the votes in a roll call style was done by Vice Chair Ekstrom. And we believed recording through GCTV, not live feed, but recording. And we learned the day after the meeting that the recording was there without the audio track. There was no audio track recorded. We've since gotten a public records request for the recording of that meeting. And I am trying diligently to get the state to tell us how we should proceed. And I have not yet talked to the attorney at the Secretary of State's office that does the public records requests, deals with the problems. Once we do that, we will have a way to move forward. I did have a question for Member Ekstrom. You have your minutes from that meeting that you took with you tonight?
It was January 27th?
Yes, because it was the day before you came back from your trip, right? That's why I said it was the perfect storm.
No, but I probably have them in my other notebook.
Okay, so we would need to get those to Recording Secretary Farber to get those minutes taken down, at least officially. And then we believe from our informed discussion with the superintendent that we'll likely need to do some revotes in a public session that is recorded. And once we have clarification on that from the Secretary of State's office, we'll move forward. So that's new business item E. And procedural updates on subcommittee assignments. I believe we covered that actually in the committee reports. We indicated that the Member Ekstrom is chair of the budget subcommittee and that Member Karen is chair of the health and safety, policy and program. Sorry, I put it in the wrong place on my little thing here, and I'll fix that. And health and safety has not yet met, and we now have a representative for the Collaborative for Education. So I believe we've covered all of that, other than meeting dates. Budget subcommittee meets daily at 8:15. That's a joke. See who's listening.
That's pretty close.
Pretty close to daily at this point. We currently have been operating on a schedule where we meet Tuesdays and Thursday mornings, and those are posted on the school committee the school district website. And policy and program, you all are meeting 12:30. Yeah.
No, policy and program is sort of a little more complicated because we are working with a representative from MASC, so we have to work based on their schedule as well as ours. We have currently set our next meeting for, was it March 2nd? March 4th, and at 5:30. And since for health and safety, we're just sticking with second Tuesday for now until we have set a chair.
Is that second Tuesday at 12:30? Is that right?
Yes, typically, but we have moved, because of a conflict, we have moved the March meeting to 1.
Okay. And just a reminder for those paying attention at home or in the room that all of these meetings are published and open in accordance with open meeting law, can be found on the school district website along with a posting and an agenda. Any additional information from any of the school committee members or the superintendent regarding the subcommittee assignments?
Not regarding assignments, but regarding public notice, I also want to thank Adrian Badal, who is working to post minutes from subcommittees really quickly. So in addition to our recording secretary that attends full committee meetings, there are minutes from the subcommittee meetings, of which there were 3 that have been approved by the subcommittee and then come forward to the full committee. And then once approved, those make it to the website. So for those that are interested in understanding the work of the subcommittees and how that affects the full committee. Those are also published, and we post audio files, and we work hard to make the information accessible. People may not be able to attend a subcommittee meeting necessarily, but they should have access to that information.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, and now we are moving on. Is there any other business?
I have an item, if
Please,
I
Mayor
may.
Wiedegardner.
And I'm going to do a handout. At the most recent Mass Municipal Association annual meeting, there was a discussion among the mayors with regard to disparity in admissions for regional vocational and technical schools, and the way that they go about deciding who is chosen from area schools to go and not go. And there's certainly a significant group of communities around the state that have shown a pattern of disparities along the lines of, I'll just read from the letter. The selective admissions authority to admit students largely on the basis of their academic performance in middle school, leaving behind others, including many students with disadvantages who might have benefited from a vocational technical education. So what they've done is written a letter to Secretary of Education James Pizer and Commissioner Jeffrey Riley. So, and they were asking various mayors to sign on. Now, I'm not suggesting that that is the case for Franklin County Tech School, but nevertheless, I brought along a copy of the letter so that you can understand the full extent of what the people who signed on, the communities who signed on to this letter, and I was one of them, are thinking in terms of how they might go about fixing any of those disparities should they come up in their communities. So I just have copies of the letter to send out.
Please.
Okay. And I think I have enough copies, so just take one, pass it down. If not, I can make more.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Please, Member Ekstrom.
Did you all talk about tuition costs for the technical schools at all?
I don't know that tuition costs is in there. I can't recall. It's been a while. It's been a couple of weeks since I read the letter. Were there enough copies? Okay.
Yes. Any other comments from school committee members regarding this? Member Hollins, I'm not surprised, please.
Well, I also read an article statewide talking about how this has become a big issue and how and the article that I read said that many of the students now that are going into vocational technical schools do not even pursue vocational technical careers, and they're displacing students who really need the training. I thought of this when the high school principal mentioned we had 5 specialty programs at the high school. And what came to mind is that Greenfield has 4 representatives on the Vocational Technical School Committee. And I don't know, in the 10 years I've been involved with the schools, there ever was a meeting with those people to talk about how do our students who apply get in? Do they get in for the careers that they want? I just think it's a really interesting topic now that it's getting statewide recognition, and it rings a bell that some of our students with unique needs aren't accepted. And I think it's a great topic for us to look at.
Thank you. Mayor Wiedegardner, please.
I would agree with that. The city of Greenfield pays a significant amount out of its city budget for the tech school. So in years past, I'm going back now to when I was on school committee, we would have a report on a regular basis from, at the time, whoever the tech school representative was. I think it looks as if the process has changed slightly, because there was always a member of the school committee, this body, who also served on the tech school. So if the process has changed, it's changed, but I'm wondering if we can't, at least on a every other month basis or so forth, get some type of report from one or more of the
No money
four.
without a report? No money without a report?
I'm sorry, what?
No money
no.
without a report?
We're not there yet.
That was, yes, it was in jest. But I agree, it's a very interesting topic. It's certainly relevant to, some of the, not just this conversation, but also hearing that our vocational technical school, Franklin County Tech, is currently bursting at the seams with students. It's certainly relevant to see how Greenfield is represented proportionally within that student body, and probably a number of other things that I haven't even thought of. Superintendent Harper, did you have a comment?
Well, it might be good to begin with minutes, just to see the discussions. I'm not sure that the first step would be to speak with a representative of that group, so much as to begin getting information and to look at the proportion of the tech school that comes out of the Greenfield budget. Often when we talk about the total education budget, that figure includes the payment to the tech school, and that gets sort of rolled into the way that the education budget is talked about. And of course, that is required, but is a very different process, and folks don't have any say or control over how that allocation is spent. Certainly, the school committee doesn't review or have any authority over it, and nor does the council. It's essentially a bill that comes that is paid. So it might be useful to understand before this committee how the tech school is using that allocation from Greenfield.
I think minutes would be fine, but I see no harm in having members of representing us at the tech school reporting back to us on what's happening over there and what issues they're discussing at their school committee members, particularly now that it's budget season.
Is there another comment?
I said, I think they meet the same time we meet. But
That's correct, yes, same day and time.
Well, that could be a problem then.
I hear their meetings are much shorter, though. Thank you for that, Mayor Rita Gardner, and I definitely think we'll see this on an agenda in some form very soon. Any other business? Member Hollins, please.
I have two other things to mention. I don't remember what month it was, but several months ago, I raised the issue of the new guidelines from the Department of Ed for addressing the needs of LGBTQ youth. And we made a commitment to put that on an agenda. The state came out with new guidelines, recommendations for school committees. I had some role in that, and I would be glad that we actually followed up with that, so we're all advised on what the State Board of Ed is advising. And also, we released some redacted executive session minutes. I wasn't surprised, but when I went back through our regular meeting minutes, I noticed that there were a lot more executive sessions than when we did it by year. Let's release the minutes of 2018. So I would like us to get a list of the executive sessions that we didn't have minutes for to review and release. I've started doing that, but I think that would be important.
Superintendent Harper, and then Member Johnson.
Well, I think this was addressed earlier, but as the committee is aware, some might not be released because they might be ongoing matters, for example, that are still subject to executive session. So as you noted, the dates that the meetings were held and the agenda, which would indicate whether there was an executive session, are all public. So I'm not clear on what the request is, but that would be the reason that they would not have been brought forward, could have been the reason they were not brought forward.
Member Johnson?
I guess my memory differs from Member Hollins about what we decided at the meeting where we discussed LGB curriculum, I think we committed to reading the guidance. I don't think we committed to having an agenda item, although I think that would be great, but just for the record. And then I think also that the executive session minutes for the meeting where we were reviewing and releasing those would be a source of information of which minutes weren't approved and why. So I think that we do have a record of that, probably accessible to us in executive session.
Thank you. Where would we find the guidance from the state on the LGBTQ youth guidelines?
I think Member Holland sent a link when she researched that, but I'll send a link to the committee, and I'll find it and send it to folks.
Thank you. Any other comment on that? Any other business? Okay, seeing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. We are going to go into executive session. We will not be returning to public session. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
The motion is to go into executive session.
Motion to go into executive session. Thank you. Superintendent Harper, please.
You will need to state, Chair, the purpose for executive session.
The purpose for our executive session under Massachusetts General Law, Section 30A, subsection 21, Item 1 is to discuss the reputation, character, physical condition, or mental health rather than professional competence of an individual, or to discuss the discipline or dismissal of, or complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual. Thank you for that reminder. Do I have a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
A motion from Member Johnson, seconded from Member Karen. Any discussion? All those in favor?
This is a roll call vote.
Roll call vote. Thank you for the reminder.
Mayor Rita Gardner?
Aye.
Member Hollins? Member Karen?
Yes.
Vice Chair Ekstrom?
Yes.
Chair Proietti?
Yes.
Myself?
Yes.
All right. Member.
Motion is passed to move into executive session. Thank you.